Hey guys, this is Miss Sims, and today we're going to look at an introduction to biochemistry. Biochemistry is really cool because it is where biology and chemistry intersect. So, chemistry is just looking at how atoms and molecules interact and form different things around us. And then biology, that little prefix bio there, means life. So, we're looking at now the chemistry of life. So, not just chemical structures and processes, but ones that occur in living organisms. Okay, so that is where we take all of those elements that we've learned about previously, but then we apply them in living organisms. So whether that be a squirrel, an octopus, bacteria, coral, or even you. So biochemistry is super important for every single living organism across our planet. Previous to this, we've been talking about inorganic compounds, which are molecules that are not of biological origin. So these are, for example, like our ionic compounds. So table salt, for example, is Na and Cl. So there's two ions or atoms with charges, and they just are attracted to each other because of the charge, and they balance out those charges there. So all of those ionic compounds are considered inorganic compounds or inorganic molecules. Another type of inorganic molecule we've looked at are our covalent compounds, our small covalent compounds, such as our universal solvent, water. So water, we have one oxygen in the middle, and then two hydrogens on the side. And in our covalent compounds, instead of having charges, they will just share electrons. So oxygen in the middle with its 6 valence electrons or outer electrons, and then each hydrogen on the sides with its 1 valence electrons, and they decide to share those, forming covalent bonds there. Okay. Well, today what we're going to start looking at is organic compounds. These are also covalently bonded, so they're still sharing those electrons. But these in particular can typically contain carbon, unless it's a carbonate or an oxide. And we're not going to really look at what carbonates and oxides are in particular for our class. But for the future, if you see something that says carbonate or oxide, it's not technically an organic compound, even if it has carbon in it. Okay, and just for reference, carbon, here is the Bohr model for that. Carbon has 6 protons in its nucleus, and then for the most common isotope, it also has 6 neutrons in its nucleus. And then around the nucleus and its electron shells, it's got 2 valence electrons in the first, 2 electrons in its first shell, and then 4 valence electrons for a total of 6 electrons total. Okay. The organic molecules that we're going to look at in particular are typically going to be macromolecules. So molecule, we know, is just where we have 2 or more atoms bonded together. But then we have this first part, macro. Macro, if you've heard that before, macro just means large, very large or very big. So in particular for this definition, it's a molecule that contains a very large number of atoms. So the molecule itself is going to be large in comparison to the other molecules that we've seen. They're not going to be huge in the sense of our perspective, but in the perspective of the other molecules we've talked about, they're much bigger. And the macromolecules that we're going to be looking at, there are 4 main types, and I have a few examples of them over here. The 4 main types are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And so some of these you may have heard of before, particularly carbohydrates and proteins, and maybe a little bit of lipids you've probably heard about in context of food. If somebody is on a low-carb diet, they are avoiding eating carbohydrates, or the keto diet that is popular right now. In that diet, people eat a lot of proteins. Those 4 macromolecules we'll be looking at more specifically Rather than just the food aspect, though, we're going to look at those in the context of their chemical makeup and their chemical structures. Okay. Last little bit of terms that you'll need to know for our biochemistry unit is monomer, which is the simplest repeating unit that makes up a macromolecule. So these are going to be the little teeny tiny pieces that all add up to make one big macromolecule. So they are relatively simplistic in comparison to the larger molecules. So they're just little pieces, and they can either be exactly the same and be repeated, or it might be pretty similar but just slightly different, like I've drawn these here. But they're all individual pieces. In contrast, polymer, so mono, if you go back to that, mono means one. So if you think of monotheism means belief in one God, mono or monomer means one, okay? So each of these are individual one piece, one piece, one piece, one piece, one piece, one piece. Okay, so they're all individual one pieces. In contrast, there's polymer. Polymer, that front there, poly. If you've heard of polytheism, polytheism is belief in multiple gods. Or maybe from math class, polygon. Polygon is a shape that has multiple sides. Okay, so poly means many or multiple. Okay, many or multiple. So these are going to be the larger molecules, and they're going to be made of two or more similar smaller molecules linked together. So they're going to be made of the same things that these monomers are. However, it's going to be those monomers are now linked together to make one much larger molecule. Okay, so those are the main terms that you guys are going to need. So biochemistry, chemistry of life, and then now we're going to be looking at the organic chemistry, which is the chemistry that has lots of carbons in it. Particularly, we're going to be looking at the four main macromolecules, and we'll go into those specifically in another video. And all of those macromolecules are made of individual monomers that come together to make larger polymers. So I hope this video has helped. If so, leave a like. If you have any questions, comment down below and I'll help you out. Have an awesome day. Bye.